Well, good morning everyone at Golden Valley School, and thank you for inviting me to do a short introduction to the Christmas story that you can watch as an assembly or in class. My name is Steve. I'm the vicar of Trendlewood Church, and before things got very strange, you might remember that I used to come in and take the service every now and again, and I really enjoyed meeting you and talking to you. So it's sad not to have been able to do that recently, but we have this wonderful technology to make a video that you can watch at your convenience. So here we go. And this service, this assembly, is designed to be a chance to think about Christmas and what it means. And they've asked me just to do that very briefly. We have all sorts of family happenings and traditions and plans around Christmas. We do some things the same every year, but not all houses do things exactly the same. Not everybody celebrates. Not everybody is able to take a holiday. Some people have to carry on working. We're grateful for people like our doctors and nurses who work over Christmas to keep people who are poorly, keeping them going, keeping them in good health and bringing them back to fullness of health. We're really grateful for people who do that. But for most of us, it's a bit of a break and a chance to have some presents and to have a bit of a party. Don't know how that's going to work this year. And to think about the story that Christmas represents. For some people, it's just, hey, let's have a midwinter festival. It's cold, let's celebrate and party. Other people remember that there's a story in the midst of it where throughout the church down the ages, people have used this as the day, 25th of December, when we celebrate the birth of Jesus. And I wondered if we might just explore that for a couple of minutes and see how we go about finding out, well, what's the truth and what's been added on? What's not quite certain as reality and what's absolutely sure. Jesus was a real person. He was born in the Middle East. Here, look, you can see a globe here. And if I just lean it down, then there we go. Very roughly the part of the world where Jesus was born about 2,000 years ago in the edge of the Mediterranean. This is a very old globe that I was given a long time ago. We know he was real. We know he was a historical character. We know he must have been born because all people are born. Where and when was he born? Well, if you want to investigate that, you can get hold of really old texts and manuscripts and writing, and you can look. They're quite small print. You can look at them and see if you can get to read them. But you discover that the first story of Jesus says this: Egeneto de enteis nemeras ekene. Well, that's not English, is it? Sounds all Greek to me. Funny thing is, it is Greek. That's one of the earliest written versions of the story of Christmas, and the language that it was written in is the Greek language. Not even the Greek language like people from Greece speak today, but old-fashioned classical Greek, and very few people except special scholars are able to read that and understand it. Even when you try and translate it, it uses ways of speaking that don't make any sense to me. So I'm really grateful that we have simpler versions. This is a Bible, and in the second half of it we find that story. It's under the heading The Gospel of Luke. Luke wrote the first stories of Jesus down, along with some other people, Matthew and Mark and John. And Luke took the story that he knew and wrote it down in that classical Greek style, and then translators, people who understood that language, put it into English, and down the ages people have updated the English so it's the sort of language that you and I understand. Even the English at the time this was first translated would be a bit weird to us. If you've ever heard anybody doing any recitals from Shakespeare or from Chaucer, old writers, they're speaking English, but not an English that you and I can get. So we need translators to take the Greek to Old English, to Modern English, to English that you and I understand. And after we've been through all those processes and investigated them carefully, then we end up with an English Bible in a language that you and I can get to grips with. And when we finally get to that point, lots of work involved in it. Of course, this Bible is quite a lot of pages. When you get to that point, we're able to sit down and read a story that you and I would recognise as a story we tell around Christmas time. About that time, says Luke, the Emperor Augustus ordered a census to be taken throughout the Roman Empire. When this first census took place, Quirinius was the governor of Syria. Everyone went to register himself, each to his own town. So a census is counting the amount of people in the different places. And Joseph went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to the town of Bethlehem in Judea, the birthplace of King David. And Joseph went there because he was a descendant of David. He went to register with Mary, who was promised in marriage to him. She was pregnant, and while they were in Bethlehem, the time came for her to have her baby. And she gave birth to her first son, and she wrapped him in strips of cloth, and she laid him in a manger. There was no room for them to stay in the inn. That's the story that Luke wrote down. It's a story about people counting people and wanting to know how many people there were in each place. And the way they did it in the days before they had the internet and good postal system was they told everybody to go home, go back to where you came from, and when you get there, we'll count you. And then we'll know how many people come from Nazareth, and how many people come from Bethlehem, and how many people come from Judea, and how many people come from all the different places around there. It's a very simple system. But if you're pregnant and you've got to go a long journey, well, it's probably quite awkward and uncomfortable and painful. That's why we add in the idea that, well, Mary must have travelled on a donkey because she couldn't have walked that far. And then we sing the song Little Donkey, which is based on that assumption, that guess. Luke writes those few verses, and they're very brief. And then he goes on to tell lots of stories about who that baby grew up to be. The Jesus about whom I tell stories in assembly, by the time he got to age 12, seemed to be wiser than even the wise people around. And by the time he got to his late 20s, early 30s, was teaching and speaking and travelling around, seemed to be amazing at healing people, did fantastic things, fed people, made food, spread around. There were other miracles ascribed to him. He could calm storms. It appears like he was able to do something to do with walking on the water. We're not quite sure we understand exactly what. But everybody was agreed that this man, who was once a baby, grew up to be absolutely astonishing. Later in Luke's Gospel, he says, the people were astounded at his teaching. They'd never heard anything like this before. So I guess my challenge over Christmas is to take just a few moments here and there, whenever you can, to ask yourself, who did this baby grow up to be, and what do I think of what he taught? And of course, as we follow the story through the new year, when we follow the story as far as Easter, we find out what happened to the baby who grew up to be Jesus, but stirred up trouble. But that's for part 2 next year. Have a great celebration. Have a very happy Christmas. Be nice to your teachers, and I'll look forward to meeting up with you in the new year at some point. God bless you all.